Let's talk about this uphill battle that's coming between the White House and the House Democrats, at least, over the president's tax returns, with CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Shan Wu. Shan, welcome back.
Hi, Victor. Good to see you.
So the president says that the law is 100% on his side. Is it?
It doesn't appear to be, actually. It seems quite the opposite. The law seems pretty straightforward, that they're able to request under this provision of the law anybody's tax returns. So it doesn't seem to be any kind of wiggle room. There's no threshold that they need to establish for it. They can just go ahead and request it. And so far, from what his legal team has produced, it seems like pretty weak in terms of their arguments. The letter that his lawyer did just looks like a grab bag mishmash of arguments, and it doesn't look like they really have much to do besides perhaps trying to sway the public opinion. Maybe that's, as usual, the real point of this.
So let's pick something out of that grab bag then. In this letter that you mentioned from Mr. Consovoy, the president's attorney, to the Treasury Department's general counsel, they say, or he says at least, that the returns cannot be released because the House request does not, quote, advance any proper legislative purpose. Chairman Neal in his letter said earlier in the week that they're looking into, his committee is looking into, but it's not limited to, the extent to which the IRS audits and enforces the federal tax code against the president. First, let's talk about that threshold that Mr. Consovoy set, that it doesn't advance any proper legislative purpose. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's a very difficult legal argument to make, because the mere fact of who is asking for it really on its face makes it a legitimate legislative purpose. So what that attorney tries to argue is, well, even if they state verbally a legit purpose, it's really pretextual. So then he quickly tries to move to kind of looking at the intent and motivation behind it. And that would be really, really hard to show in court. I mean, the only way, it's hard enough in the criminal case to show intent. Of course, if you had like an admission, a confession from Congress that, oh, this is a pretext, we don't really care about a legislative oversight issue, we just want to get the president, sure, that's not going to happen. So then they'd have to try to establish it through other actions to show that it's somehow biased against the president. So it's really just a non-starter. There's no place for him to go from that statement.
So let me read something from CNN legal analyst Ross Garber. Wrote a piece for Politico about why Congress might not be able to get the returns, that unless Democrats invoke impeachment, that they'll lose the legal fight. Questions of legitimacy, as we've been discussing. Also, that this could go on for so long that a judge could dismiss it in 2021 at the end of this Congress. What do you make of potentially the need to invoke impeachment to get those, because of those vast exclusive powers that belong to Congress exclusively?
Well, Ross is unquestionably the impeachment expert, but I don't think we're in the realm of impeachment, and I don't think, at least based on the plain reading of that provision, that it is not tied to impeachment. They simply can request not just the president's, but anybody's tax returns. And again, the arguments being advanced that, the grab bag then extends to, oh, this is actually punishment for the president's speech. And lastly, perhaps more in Ross's realm, they talk about the fact that in any event, this has got to go to the Supreme Court because it's a violation of the separation of powers. And so it's like, pick your choice, take your choice. Which argument are you actually trying to make? And actually, it doesn't seem to be a violation of the separation of powers at all. It seems exactly to be an example of the separation of powers working. You have the legislative branch exercising its duty for oversight.
So you're a defense attorney. If you had to write a letter, what would be the foundation upon which you would try to protect this president or anyone's tax returns?
Well, I think it would be helpful if I could actually show that there was some regulation about audits needing to be confidential. That's, of course, one of the big questions. Is there really an audit going? I think I would just choose one of these issues. I mean, they're going to have to make some kind of precedent. There hasn't really been a challenge to this before. And so I would probably just choose the notion of the separation of powers if I had to choose one of them. And I would probably try to make Ross's argument work with me to say that in a normal circumstance, the president's returns shouldn't be part of this provision because it's the president. And it causes a big public scrutiny, a big disruption of the presidency if it's his returns that are being examined by Congress. And that, I think I'd probably go with that argument rather than the other smorgasbord that's been put out there.
All right, Shan Wu, thank you so much.